not in the transmission world. So us and a couple other AMP communities were facing the same problem. So we started talking. We did a lot of due diligence to figure out what we could do other than create these dispatch centers. We talked about having a regional center between all of us. We talked about other things. And we found out that we could get out of this game by selling these assets. And our investor-owned utility came to us and said, hey, we would buy them from you. So we started conversations. It took us a while to understand what all of this actually meant. But we brought AMP in to be with us, to sit next to us at the table while we're having these conversations with investor-owned utility and help us to understand and give us their insight and opinions. And through this process, we really realized that it could be problematic, could be some heartburn selling this equipment because we've had this equipment, we've owned this equipment, we've built this equipment for a long time, but also selling it to somebody that we weren't familiar with nor had a good relationship with was a little scary proposition. We could have sold to investor-owned utility. There's other companies around the country, those that are based in Houston or Florida or California, that purchase these things, but we don't have relationships with them. So we reached out to AMP and said, can you do something to help us here? Because that's what AMP does. AMP is like you said, a member-owned community organization. There's 135 members, and they're celebrating their 50th year this year. So there's a long track record of being there for communities, and we are AMP. Us in Newton Falls and the other 133 communities, we are AMP. So they got engaged and finally said, you know what, we think there's a way that we could help out. So they formed this subsidy, as you mentioned, AMP-T, AMP Transmission. And that was, I believe it was really meant to help communities out there in situations like this. But also, we are all facing these rising transmission costs that I'm sure you are as well. And so this would do something to help them with that as well. So that was our situation. We ended up going through the process. We chose AMP-T to sell to, and it's been a good relationship, and I can't say enough about it.
All right, Robert, how have members of your community responded to the AMP-T deal that you did?
Yeah, they responded well. I really didn't get a lot of feedback, to be honest. We had a number of meetings on this and discussed it. But the local radio station and newspaper had reached out and wrote articles about it. But it was well received because AMP has a very good reputation in our community, and we've been a member for a long time, since just after they formed, almost 50 years ago.
Tell me about your city council's response to the AMP-T deal that you did.
Yeah, they were favorable to it. We spent some time discussing this over time and explaining to them, hey, this is a situation that we're now in. We didn't agree with it, but the governing body said, we don't care if you agree with it or not. So we worked with the consultant to try to change that decision, and that didn't happen. So we brought them along as we went. And then when this opportunity came up, explained to them how the proposal looked, and then they were favorable for it. Our deal, if you will, was similar, probably, I'm assuming similar to your deal. There's not a lot of negotiation, whereas there's a net book value that this equipment has, whether you're to sell to anyone out there, because there's an amount that they can recover. So this equipment and these dollars are recoverable. And then we also, something that we did as well is we had a maintenance agreement for the continual operation of this equipment that we would take care of ourselves.
And that kept you in control, in a sense. Is that correct?
I think control is something that it kept us in control as far as maintaining those assets. But, I think the control, by having AMP-T purchase this, we do have a level of control that we wouldn't have if we would have sold to somebody else. Whereas, like we talked about, we're a member of AMP. We can go down to meetings and voice our opinion. We can talk to board members. We can be on the board. So there is a level of control there that we wouldn't have with anyone else. And then when it comes down to the future of maybe replacing that equipment, we can have a voice in what equipment is chosen or how that's done, and we can have that control and that aspect. The maintenance agreement allows us to maintain that equipment, which is good because we know that equipment, we installed it, and we're right here. It also creates a revenue source. So I believe the agreement is that they would pay us for the labor and an overhead rate. I believe Pam's on here. She can maybe elaborate more on that, on the contract and the agreement that we have.
Robert, let me get to the, how many customers do you have?
We're about just over 13,000 customers.
13,000, and the dollar amount that AMP was paying for your transmission assets was about $500,000. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep. The assets were at one substation, and it was a portion of those assets.
Sure.
There was a number of large breakers and some equipment there.
Well, I guess the question I have for you at this stage is, based on your experience with AMP-T, would you recommend other communities to participate in a similar program?
I would. Like I said before, we're partners with AMP, and we wanted someone, and we trust AMP, and we want someone to walk with us hand in hand through this. And they stepped up and they said, you know what, we're going to help you out, because that's why they're here. And I told our city council, when I was able to present this opportunity to council, and they came up and gave a presentation, I said, I consider them like the white horse running, coming in through the doorway there, because they took this burden, they took this problem, and they took this liability, because there was a lot of liability that we had if we were to move forward with operating that ourselves. They took that off of our plate. And they're folks that we know, that we talk to regularly, and they're really a part of us. So that relationship is very important. And that will pay dividends down the line moving forward, because they have our best interest in mind. They're here, and that organization was formed, and the work that they do is because of all of us. And so, we're AMP to a certain aspect. And so to have someone like that with those critical assets, because these are critical pieces of infrastructure. There's only 90 some communities in Ohio that are an electric provider. And these that we're talking about, these are how we get the power coming in from the outside world. So you want someone that has the experience and expertise, and they do, and they've hired folks that can do that. And we don't have the ability to hire folks like that, under our world, and we couldn't even, we couldn't afford to do that. So to have someone that has the expertise and the skills and the ability to do that, but yet someone that is completely trustworthy and we have a relationship with, that is key, and that is of the utmost importance. So we had, it was a new thing to us to sell these assets, because, we have all these services. We provide water, sewer, electric. We provide cable and internet to the community. We provide trash service. So we do that. So we're used to providing those operations, but, this is not a world that we wanted to get into. And so it benefited us by having them do it for us.
Sure. All right. We appreciate you very much. We have some other panel members I have to get to, so thank you so much for your help.
Sure. And if there's any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer those.
Thank you. The next individual is Matt Goss, who is from MS Consultants. And Matt, I'm looking for your face here. I'm seeing audio only at the moment.
I'm right here.
Okay, there you are. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Matt, would you take a few moments to identify yourself and tell us how you've interfaced with this AMP-T deal for Newton Falls?
Yeah, real quick, just a background. I was an engineer for American Electric Power for the first 8 years of my career, actually doing planning for large transmission lines. And through that, I went through a lot of their strategic roles in acquiring assets similar to this. So I led deals for that utility out west and here in Ohio, acquiring assets just like what you guys mentioned. I left, obviously, the big utility, and I went to a small engineering firm, and now I'm assisting communities like yourself in understanding what's happening. The
Matt, tilt your camera down a little bit more. We're getting a look through the top half of your head.
There we go. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that. So I'm here to assist communities like yourself navigate where we can through this very complex change. Historically, what's happened in the past is your community and others like you have had to build and pay for your own transmission. But on top of that, you've had to pay for all of First Energy's transmission too. So we call that, in my mind, there's a way you call it, it's called a pancake rate. You're paying 100% of your own cost and you're paying a share of First Energy's cost. And what the new legislation changed in the last about 15 years is that you can take your high voltage cost and look like a utility yourself. And so with that change enters AMP and how AMP can provide a value to your community is they're allowed to be treated like a utility, just like First Energy is, just like AEP is. And that cost no longer has to be borne by your community solely. So it's a fair equity way to take this same cost and make sure everyone's paying their fair share for the same assets. That is something what this deal brings, and it is very complex, very hard to understand. And I know AMP's done a lot of work, and it takes a lot of conversation because this is stuff that is not talked about every day. And so that's something that I have assisted yourself, Mr. Lynch, and others as well to kind of come through, take a look at this. I've been on both sides of the equation. And, you know, from my perspective, I think it was said best that, you know, most communities are distribution communities. They're here to serve the customer. Most communities are not transmission communities. They are not here to build, own, and operate high voltage equipment lines. And because of it, there could be someone better off doing that. And if you were to pick anyone to do that, someone like AMP, where you guys are on their board of directors, you guys are a part of that. That is you guys. AMP is you guys. You guys still have similar control. And that gives you guys some input and a revenue stream. So as we navigate through this, this is where I've assisted you guys and will continue to do so.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate your being brief. Aaron Teeters is from Saulville. He's been the city's consulting engineer for several years now. So Aaron, please give us your perspective.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, everyone. My name is Aaron Teeters. I am with Sullivan Associates. I've helped the village since approximately 2017 with bond renewals, electric rates, power cost adjustment reviews. While working with the village staff on the electric cost of service study, I became aware of AMP services that I thought could help the village long-term stabilize its transmission cost. At some point thereafter, the village began communicating with AMP Transmission or AMP-T to learn more about what AMP-T could do for the village. And so Dave asked me to come tonight to speak to you guys, the council and the public, to help explain this arrangement. So first off, this arrangement provides the village with increased reliability while avoiding previously local transmission related costs and improvements. How this works is the village sells its transmission assets. AMP-T takes those facilities, they'll make improvements on the transmission system, and as a result, the village will receive a greater reliable service while the village continues to operate and maintain those lines. With this arrangement, future capital improvement expenses and O&M costs will be an AMP-T cost. The village share of these costs going forward in the future, currently your transmission cost is 100% on the village electric ratepayers. Going forward, that cost is going to be closer to less than 0.1%. What was 100% cost of the village is now less than 0.1%. AMP-T then recovers its cost for these facilities through its FERC-approved formula rate, all through the First Energy transmission zone. So you guys used to pay 100%, your cost will go into the First Energy transmission zone, and the entire zone will then pay for those costs and those improvements. So that kind of explains the arrangement. Some of the benefits associated with this: short term, the village would be compensated for the facilities that it needs to sell. And like Robert stated, it's net book value. That's a little more black and white. It's the current depreciated value of your assets that you would be selling. Over and that's industry norm, I'm sorry. And so long term, the village would continue to operate and maintain these lines, but that cost again would be an AMT cost. If there's future transmission system improvements that are required, with AMT approval, the village would be compensated for these costs. So a combination of short-term benefits and long-term benefits is the increased reliability from operating and maintaining the transmission system in a looped manner rather than how it's currently set up as two radio interconnections. So AMT's proposed quite a few improvements to you guys' system to get this done. Just to list a few, there's several 69 kV breakers that we replaced, structure upgrades at Church Street, Warren Road substation. There'd be a bus tie breaker. There'd be expanded metering points or 3-breaker ring to accommodate looping in and out at Milton Boulevard metering point. So this arrangement does require the village to sell its transmission assets and AMT to put these assets in part of the bulk or network transmission rate of the first energy transmission zone. So this means the village transmission system will operate in a looped manner where bulk transmission load could flow over the village transmission lines, not just the village's load. This, I do believe, can be easily done with minimal upgrades to your guys' current transmission facilities. You guys do operate 2 interconnections with a switch in between them, so I think there's minimal improvements to get this done. The way it's currently set up with switches in between, say there's a fault on First Energy's transmission line, that's going to require Bill George to do some type of manual operation with switching, where with AMT's improvements and operating the transmission system in a looped manner, you would probably never see an outage due to a First Energy fault on their transmission line.
Aaron, just around for a second, why does that decrease the chances of an outage for us here in Newton Falls?
Well, you're receiving transmission service from 2 directions, basically. So if there's an issue in the one direction, the breakers are going to communicate, relays are going to communicate with each other, and you're going to receive service from the other direction. So you would never see it, basically.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please continue.
That's okay. So presently, AMT has a transmission formula rate in the First Energy zone, where basically this rate would just be updated with new cost associated with the village. And so this is an opportunity, I believe, a good opportunity for the village to basically move a lot of possible future transmission related capital improvement costs, not on the village ratepayers anymore, but the entire First Energy zone. Like Patrick said, others have done this. Wadsworth's done this, City of Hubbard, City of Napoleon. They're doing this because of NERC compliance and controlling the electric system cost. So we are helping others, other AMP members that are currently reviewing this. So you guys are not alone in looking at this. There's others that's done it and are looking into it.
Okay, I appreciate it. Don Grunermeyer was going to join us also from Saulville. Is he's there as well? Hi, Don. How are you?
Great. Good
Don,
to be
you have
here.
you have anything you want to, well, first of all, tell us who you are and your credentials, and tell us if you want to add anything to what Aaron had to say.
Well, I'm president of Sullivan Associates, and as Aaron said, we've been working with several AMP members for quite a few years. And, I think that the opportunity to have someone like AMP in your court is a great opportunity. You're not dealing with a company that would just be buying your assets and maybe selling to someone else. You've got AMP in your corner, so to speak, fighting for you and looking out for your assets. So I think that's a really important point. And I also think that the improvements that would be made to the transmission system would also improve your reliability. And that's one thing that you would have a difficult time doing on your own without spending a lot of money. So those are, I think, key things to keep in mind. Of course, it also helps decrease your costs in the long term, and that can't be overlooked. But I think working with AMP and also increasing your reliability are key items.
Sure. Okay, folks. Thank you very much, Don. What we're going to do is go into a question and answer session. As I mentioned, this is going to be done the same way the AMI meter town hall was done. You can ask unlimited number of questions, but only one question at a time. You've got one question at a time. You've got 30 seconds to ask that question, but keep it to one question at a time, and we will come back unlimited number of times so that you can ask 1,000 questions if you want to. And I thought I saw Tim Stinson with a hand up before, so I'll go. And by the way, Bill George is with us on this panel as well. Tim, I lost your box there. If you can unmute yourself wherever you are.
I'm unmuted.
Okay.
All right. I wasn't necessarily prepared to
I'm
ask
sorry,
yet,
Tim.
but that's all right. I got a bunch.
One at a time, Tim. We'll come back.
Sure. For the guy from Wadsworth, you said it was only a half of or a quarter of a substation that you sold, or was it just one breaker? And how long did that take, I guess? How many meetings did you guys have before you guys made that investment or proposed to sell or actual deal that you sold?
Yeah, Mr. Patrick was not able to stay in the meeting, so he wasn't intended to be part of the panel, but I can turn that over to the engineers, Aaron and Matt. Aaron, do you want to start off with that?
I guess what's the question specific to the
question was about Wadsworth, whether they're selling off the same amount of equipment as
they did not sell off the same amount of equipment. Right. That was very clear. They only sold at least one breaker or a part of a breaker or a part of a substation. I guess my question was it a quarter of a substation, a half of a substation, an eighth, a 32nd? And how many meetings did it take before they actually
one question at a time, Tim. We're going to get to Aaron. Aaron?
Tim, good question. I'm not sure what they sold, but I'll say in this, for the village, it's your 69 kV facilities only. And so once you get past your 69 kV busing structure at your substation, that's all going to be 15 kV equipment. It's not going to be your transformers, things of that sort. So it's all 69 kV related equipment, nothing 15 kV.
All right, the next question that has our hand up is someone named Nancy. Nancy, you have to unmute yourself. Go ahead, Nancy. You have to unmute yourself, then go ahead so you can ask your question. Nancy, we're getting your video like crazy. That's fine. But, all right, I'm going to go on. The next person I had their hand up, I thought was Brian Kropp. His name is no longer appearing here. All right, well, we will come back to Mr. Kropp when he gets back online again. Councilman Zimmerman, it looked like you had a question, sir, if you want to unmute yourself. I thought you did at least. Yeah, try to unmute yourself if you can, Adam. There you go.
Hey, I didn't have a question offhand. I was just adjusting my view here on the screen. So
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, please raise your hands. The mayor has a question, so let's go to Mayor Klein. Mayor?
Yeah, Mr. Patrick's not here, so I don't know if this would be a question that you could answer or.
Sure.
But I'm just curious, and this is kind of two, but kind of one. I'm wondering how long that it's been since they had in Wadsworth had sold to AMP, and what if 10 years from now they decide they want to get a power from another entity? Are they able to or no?
Yeah, I can answer that question myself because I have talked to Robert. Wadsworth, I think it's been a little bit less than a year that they've had it, but they do have an opt-out and buyback clause, which is what we would have as well. So as far as the source of the power, they're still, this is the second half of your question, Mayor, they're still members of AMP, which means they're still buying their electricity from American Municipal Power. And we would still be members of AMP as well. We would continue our membership, and we can't, actually we cannot revoke our membership as a member, and Wadsworth can't do that either. So there is a restriction in that regard.
Mr. Lynch, could I just add something
Sure.
real quick for you?
Yeah, please do, Matt.
The only thing I do want to add is the ownership of this 69 kV equipment does not relate to where you buy your power from. So in this world, we have transmission, distribution, and generation. The ownership of the transmission isn't going to change where your generation comes from. Those are going to be handled separate contracts, as Mr. Lynch said. So whatever you do with this asset will not have any influence to the other pieces.
Okay. The next hand up is Anna Eby. Anna, unmute yourself, and you're limited to 30 seconds to ask your question, but we will come back to you unlimited times. Go ahead, Anna.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my question is, the gentleman from Wadsworth stated that they were in trouble. Are we in trouble? And is that why you want to sell this?
Well, I'll give an initial response. I'm going to turn it over to you, Matt. Anna, they were in trouble because FERC was going to threaten to take over regulation of their transmission lines. FERC has not taken over our transmission lines, but they could do that at any time, in which case we would be hit with all these onerous regulations and costs. So Wadsworth absolutely had FERC taking over, but part of the reason that, at least from my perspective, we're moving forward is I don't want to be around have us be subject to FERC at any time, and then all these really onerous costs passed on to you as a ratepayer. So, Matt, I'm going to throw that over to you for a moment on that topic.
Yeah, I guess trouble is always a different conversation that we can have on these. To me, the word I look for is risk. Their risk is the exact same risk you guys have, except they had also additional compliance risk. Compliance risk carries fines. Today, you don't have that fine risk that could be governed by NERC, which is who he talked about. There is no guarantee that will change in the future for better or worse. But what I can say is you guys as a village do have other risks. And I mean that from if a storm comes through, if damage happens, right now that cost is on you as a community only. That is a risk. And so if you guys were to move these assets to your other partner, you will actually lower the risk to your entire customer base. Therefore, any change that happens to this system, you don't pay for, except, as Aaron mentioned, 0.1% versus 100%. So, I look at this less about, is it their situation and your situation? You're all in the same situation. Some just carry that extra burden right now. But I would say that the other side of this coin is also when we talk about landing a new customer, a new manufacturing plant, or a new large electric use facility, if you had to expand your 69 kV system to reach that customer, you as a community or the customer has to pay for that. Under this agreement, we can actually get AMP-T to pay for upgrades, which then First Energy is paying for, not you guys. So there's a way that this can help grow communities beyond what it is too. So to me, to answer the question, you do have risk. It's just not going to be the exact same risk. And that's why other communities are looking at this.
Yeah, Aaron, would you respond to that as well from the standpoint of Saulville?
Sure. So Wadsworth, I believe, is served at 138 kV. You guys are 69. And so there was additional NERC compliances that they were going to have to meet, is what Robert was trying to explain there. The reason that I brought this to the village was to avoid future costs for your transmission facilities, your capital costs, your O&M costs. It also provides greater reliability. The system is going to be improved at AMP-T's cost, not the village's cost. So those are some of the reasons that this was offered as an idea to the village.
Okay. Next hand up was Joe Gregor. Joe, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Okay, I was under the understanding that FERC governs anything 115,000 volts and above, and they don't really have any stipulations or regulations for 69 kV. So why would we be dealing with FERC if we only have a 69 kV line?
Yeah, well, I'll make the initial response to that. There have been discussions over the years of FERC actually regulating 69 kV. And of course, that's always a potential. And I don't want that to happen. And if we do upgrade to 138 kV, we'll be subject to that regulation. Matt, I'm going to pass the rest of the answer over to you.
Yeah, so this is a great question. And it's another question about risk. And the way I can answer this for you is there's two entities that we're going to care about. One is FERC with the F, one is NERC with an N. FERC, you're going to deal with at any voltage that's called transmission. FERC is about regulating transmission, and you do have to comply with all their rules. So you guys belong to a bigger body called PJM, Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland. And it's a conglomerate of utilities. That's where you buy and sell power. AMP's part, everybody's part of this grid, if you call it that. You have to be part of that and play by all their rules. 69 kV is part of those rules. If the question's about NERC, NERC is where the Reliability Council comes into. That is not currently at 69 kV. However, those discussions are always ongoing because they're looking for customers that can influence 115 kV and above. And if you own what we call through path transmission, so it's something that can go down to 69 kV and back up to 138 kV, that can influence, and that's been the discussion. Will they do this? I can never commit to that. But your FERC is regulating 69 kV today. There's nothing stopping NERC from taking over 69 kV. So it's not about do they, don't they. It's more about they could, but you're going to have, it's going to be an ongoing debate for a long time. So both of those play into this conversation, and you still need to meet FERC, but NERC is a future risk.
All right, next up is Councilman Bariak. Councilman, you have one question. We will come back to you again, so you'll be unlimited, but you do have to unmute yourself to ask that one question.
First of all, this guy Patrick comes down here and tells us they're in a situation. My question is to Bill George. Bill, I thought all our stuff was in good shape. As a matter of fact, our one substation is almost brand new, and the life expectancy on this stuff has got at least, 25 or 30 more years, or at least, isn't it a 50-year or something? Would you answer that, Bill, for me?
Okay, hold on a second, John. We're going to get Bill George unmuted. Bill, if you click the unmute button, I'd appreciate it. Thanks, Bill.
Okay. To answer your question, yes, a lot of our stuff, about half of the system, the transmission, was put in about 96. The one substation was put in 2007, I think it went into service. So that whole side of town is fairly new. I consider fairly new. I think there's a lot of life left to it. So that would be my answer to that.
Okay. Next is Tim Stinson. Tim, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself again, please. And if I haven't gotten to someone who's on a first round, I will come back to you, but I'm trying to make sure we go back and forth. And Councilman Alberini will be after that. I see him waving. Okay, go ahead, Tim.
So Matt from MS Consultant and Aaron from Sawmill you're also a consultant, correct? I'm assuming. So you're both consultants. Are you guys getting a kickback from AMP on either one of this for heading us towards AMP is my first question.
Okay, you got one at a time. Matt, what's your answer to that question?
No.
Okay. Aaron, what's your answer to that question?
No.
Okay. Councilman Alberini, you are next. Please unmute yourself.
Well, thank you guys, Matt and Aaron. As I sit here listening to you, Matt, you're with MS Consultants, and Aaron, you used to be with AEP in Columbus. Is that correct? So you both have extenuating circumstance or experience in this type of stuff. So maybe my first question is a what if. What if we don't do anything? What if we stand pat and something happens to the existing we're talking about transmission lines. We're not talking about substations or anything. We're talking solely transmission lines. So if something happens to those transmission lines, what happens as far as the expense of that goes?
Okay, thank you. Matt, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, I'll go first. Great question. And the simple answer is today, if anything happens to those lines, any expense associated is paid for by the village only today. So you do have an insurance policy, and there's going to be questions about how much that insurance policy addresses. You know, it may address a storm, but at the end of life, you know, you might have to rebuild this entire system. And that's what some of these communities are going through today, where they actually have to rebuild these older systems, and that expense is 100% on that community. So I have two things. One is, if you do nothing, there's value on these assets right now. And that value, AMP will pay you for that value, fair market value. So you're going to lose that fair market value. Today, you guys already paid these off. If you do nothing, no more expense will come to you other than operations and maintenance. However, someone's willing to pay you all that money back and put it in your pocket. And you will have the same service and better reliability for it. So you lose that. You're going to lose value straight up if you do nothing. And every year you wait on this, you're going to lose more value, because depreciation from a tax perspective, these assets are worth less every year you wait. So from my perspective, you're going to lose money, and then you're going to lose reliability, and you're going to keep all the risk of future maintenance on you guys as 100% as a community. So I hope that answered your question from my perspective.
All right, Aaron, the question was also directed at you from Councilman Alberini. Would you chime in, please?
Sure. Whether it's today, tomorrow, 2 years from now, it's fair market value. And so if new facilities get placed in the system, the value of the system 2 years from now is going to be less than today. If for whatever reason there's upgrades made, new facilities would be put into that valuation, and the dollars actually could be higher 2 years from now than today. The question I believe you posed in the way of if there was storm damage. My understanding, you guys do have an insurance policy. It would that policy would dictate what would have to happen. But Matt's right. It would be entirely the village's expense to deal with, as well as the insurance, whatever they cover.
Sure. Does that include upgrades? Would they have to be paid by us as well if we did nothing?
Correct.
Okay. All right. The next hand was Mr. Stinson again. Tim, would you unmute yourself again? You have 30 seconds for one question, but we will come back on limited times.
Now my questions are timed. I thought it was unlimited. It's all right.
No, it's 30 seconds for a question.
So my question is, again, for the two consultants, let me rephrase my question. Have you guys ever taken on a contract from AMP or AMP-T?
All right, hold on a second. Let's get to Matt.
We have done no work for AMP-T as of today, but we are working to become an engineering firm for them, just like any other engineering firm would. But there's nothing related to this project.
All right, Aaron, I'm going to go to you on that question as well.
Hi, this is Don. We are not doing any work for AMP-T, and years ago we did some work for AMP that had nothing to do with transmission.
Okay, thank you very much. I believe Councilwoman Spletzer was raising her hand, so we're going to go to her. Tessa, could you hit the unmute, please? There you go.
Yes.
You are live.
Thank you. I've heard enough from these consultants, and the person I'd like to hear most from right now is Mr. George from our electric department. I'd like to hear his thoughts and get what his feelings are about all of this. I want to hear from Mr. George.
Sure. All right, hold on a minute. Okay, we're going to Bill George. Bill, you have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay, I can say that I was against it. I have a lot of information that I just recently received on Friday. I think we need to take more time to look at everything now. I don't want to rush into it. I don't know how you guys as council can get stuff 3 days ahead of time and try to vote on it. So I think I need more time to read over the stuff to see what it actually says.
All right, thank you. Next question is Mr. Stinson. You have to unmute yourself, Tim.
I mean, fast and furious. I wasn't ready again. All right, well, I'll just start at the top of my list. So, Mr. Lynch, are you saying that we have a contract or proposed contract currently?
We have the skeleton of a proposed contract, but there are some things that we just are not resolved yet based on some of the contingencies about how we maintain these lines. And I don't want to sign anything until A, I have authority from council, and B, I know that we have all the maintenance capability in place. I don't like the idea of us being in charge of maintaining lines unless we're sure that we can do that. Next question was Councilman Bariak. Want to unmute yourself, Councilman?
I want to ask Bill George. Bill George, the city manager stated that he's going to save us 10 to 20%. Do you believe that's true, sir?
Okay, hold on a second. We'll go to Bill George. Bill, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, my honest opinion, I don't see it. I think we will see a discount on it. I'm not sure if it's going to be that big, but like I said, it may be in all this information that I just received. So I guess, you know what, to be honest, I can't say a lot because I don't know what all's in all this new paperwork that we received.
All right. Hold on a second. The next hand is Councilman Terry Alberini, and you'll have to hit the unmute.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As far as, and I'll ask Bill this question because he's like the resident expert on electricity and also the Green Bay Packers, I noticed too as well in the back behind it. So, listening to Matt and listening to Aaron, as far as a business perspective goes, I don't exactly see a downfall to this. So if there was a downfall to it, Bill, could you point it out to me? What it would be, possibly?
But you have to hit the unmute button.
I don't know. I think there's, my opinion, I think there's a lot. I think, you already own it. Why sell it? I mean, we're not being forced into selling it. So that's my big thing. I mean, it's like buying a new house. You don't buy it and then sell off the garage because you don't want the garage. I just don't. That's how I feel.
All right. The next in line was Mr. Stinson again. Mr. Stinson, I'm sorry, you're going to have to hit the unmute button again.
So going back to my previous questions, part B,
Yes.
we don't have a contract. Did we bid this out to any other municipalities or any other electric companies? Because a quick Google search provides at least 3 other independent electric companies or power suppliers that even operate within Ohio, and that's not even including
Sure.
the big
No, it's a good question. I can respond to that. This is a membership organization. It's not like dealing with an outside contractor. We are actually a voting member of AMP. So the law director has indicated that that's much preferable to going outside. And I'm going to have you elaborate on that a little bit, Matt. Could you do that? Matt Goss.
Oh, yes. So I brought up a lot of entities that are interested in this proposal. I represented one of those entities before. From a major utility perspective, I don't represent any of those entities now. I represent you guys in navigating which one best to partner with, if you partner with any. And so we did have a discussion on a few of these, and there are pros and cons. So we talked about them, and there's a lot of entities not interested in this. One of them is AMP-T. And so as mentioned by Mr. Lynch, the fact that you guys are members and also voting members of AMP-T is why this from a partnership makes much more of a relationship going forward than what selling them to a third party where you have no say over or any control over the assets once they're gone.
Sure. Aaron Teeters, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself to respond to the going to AMP-T as an internal matter. Aaron?
Yeah, when selling your assets, it's fair market value. It's the net book value. So depending on who you're dealing with, theoretically, you should get to the same number. And so I believe this is more has to do with who do you want to deal with over the long term? And AMP is an organization owned by its members. It's an advocate for a municipal electric system. So I believe working with AMP-T is the right approach.
Sure.
I believe your interests align.
All right. Mr. Gregor, you are up next, but you're going to have to, Joe, you got to hit the unmute button.
Okay. My question is, if we sell off this transmission line and we have the contract with that person that buys the transmission line from us, and it comes to the end of that contract, we have the ability to buy that back. But if we don't have the money or the resources at that time to buy this transmission line back, and if it sells off to somebody else, what happens to our ability to have a contract or whatever with our transmission line that may be sold to some other entity that can do whatever they want with it?
Sure. It's a good question.
Good question.
Sending that over to you, Matt.
Yeah. So I guess the greatest thing about transmission, so remember we separate everything into 3 buckets in electricity. You got who generates it, who transmit from the generator to the community, and then who is going to, and then
hold on a second.
Who's going to distribute it from the community to the house.
Okay, we're all right.
Transmission is heavily regulated by FERC and by PJM. And those regulations stipulate everything that has to happen. So as soon as you turn these over to AMP-T, or any utility for that matter, if there's ever an upgrade that's needed to be made on these lines, that upgrade is going to be made and it's going to be paid for by what we call a pro rata share. Your pro rata share, if you recall, is less than 0.1%. And so that obligation is carried forward. So whoever owns the word transmission carries that obligation with these assets forever. And so you sell them, you still don't have any risk of not being served off this transmission. You must be served, and that is what PJM's here for, who is the large market in the Eastern footprint. They are going to require, and it's called a load serving. You guys are there's gen to live. There's a whole bunch of things they must do. You have no risk So I always want to make sure we separate into 3 buckets. Your generation, you have a contract for. That doesn't affect this transmission. Selling transmission doesn't affect your access to this transmission because you're already paying for it. And whoever buys it, you're going to pay for it after that too. So there's no risk associated with whoever owns these assets, whether it be you or someone else.
Next was Brenda Persino. I thought I saw her waving there. You have to hit the unmute button, Brenda. I'm sorry. There you go.
Hey, first of all, thank you for this town hall meeting. It's a lot of good information. Just so I'm not misunderstanding anything, my question is, this is not in any way related to the smart meters coming in. This is totally separate.
Yeah, one question at a time, and I can respond to that. It is totally separate and just has to do with the distribution system. Julie Stimpert has her hand up, and ask her to unmute yourself. Miss Stimpert, go ahead.
I think I'm unmuted. I was just curious, the funds that we would receive from selling this, where is that going? Is it earmarked? Will it be decided before we move forward if we were to move forward with this?
Yeah, I'm going to respond to that, having spoken to the finance director, who, by the way, is sick with the flu. But that will be decided by city council as part of the budgetary process. So it'll have to be decided by them. Councilman Bariak, you are up next. You have to unmute yourself, sir. No, John, we can't hear you. You have to unmute. Okay.
I'd like to
one question, please, John.
We don't have a contract, as far as I know right now. We're buying a pig in a poke. Nothing's been finalized. Bill George just said he needs even more time. I want the people to know that once this is had, we're stuck with whatever Mr. Lynch negotiates. Now, my question is, why won't you guarantee the money is all going to go to electric discounts? And even if it's 3 or 4.2 million, do you really feel,
John, one question at a time. You want to know why?
All right, I got one question, sir. Excuse me.
What is it?
I'm trying to loop it together. Excuse me.
Okay.
How long do you think this discount will last?
Okay, I can respond to that. It depends on the size of the discount. I had estimated the other day that it would be 20%. Bill has indicated he's not sure it's going to be quite that high, but it's somewhat dependent upon the amount of monies that we recover for the purposes of our maintenance costs, because we're also allowed to recover the administrative costs and overhead that we have for those. In addition to that, it's going to allow us to eliminate some of our debt, but the final determination as to where and how it goes is going to be up to city council. And we have somebody new on the line. It's Matt Evans. Matt, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Sure, go ahead.
Who's the guarantee that once and if AMT gets our transmission, that they won't up the rates in the future? What's the guarantee to our customers?
Yeah, I'll answer that. We still control our own rates is the answer. We are still the controllers of our rates. And Tess, I'm going to come back to you, but Mr. Stinson had his hand up.
Mr. Lynch, can I add to that answer too?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, just, you're right. So you guys own your own rates and how you guys select them. But I just want to make sure on that transmission line, whoever owns that transmission line has to get federal approval to charge money to use that line. That is a federal formula rate governed by FERC. So one of the first questions asked was, what about FERC? FERC is how you're going to recover this cost. So nobody can buy that line and come in and charge you more money to use that line in the future without going through a very hard federal process who's there to protect all customers, not you guys. And so, there's a range that they allow utilities to earn on. they'll look just like any other utility. So they can't charge you more than what AMP charges you. There's going to be a whole process associated with that. You guys are protected by this being called transmission. Just wanted to add that out there.
Sure. Mr. Stinson, you were next. I'm sorry. Please unmute yourself.
So I have two statements first. So first of all, Matt, you did not answer Joe's question about if the transmission line can actually get resold to another company or an entity, because you didn't answer that. You said that it would.
One question at a time.
It's not a question. It's a statement. That's a statement that you did not answer that. Second of all, you did not answer Mr. Bariak's question either about how long the rate would actually last. 20% for 1 year is 20% for 1 year. It's not 10 years. It's not 5 years. So
hold on.
that's my statement. Now here's my question.
Yes.
What is AMP getting out of this? You said that they recover. What is their end game? How are they recovering? How are they recouping their money? You just said that they can't raise transmission rates unless they go to the FERC, I believe, not NERC, but they can do it. There is a legal process to raise transmission rates if they get authorization. Correct?
Okay, hold on a second, Tim. Matt, I want you to take a stab at that, and then we're going to come over to you, Aaron, on that question.
Yes. So AMP is a investor-owned utility. They're going to look like that, and you guys are the investors. So what they're going to do, and again, this is we just call it a formula rate. You take the value of the asset and you multiply it by a return that they're allowed to get. So there is an amount above the value of the asset that they're allowed to get. Now that is what we call I'm sorry, it's escaping my words right now. But that is the amount that they're going to send to First Energy. So they're going to send the bill to First Energy for that. First Energy will send it with PJM, and all of this gets spread back out to all customers. So that bill, that is let's just say that the bill for all of these assets is $100,000 a year. That $100,000, you guys would pay less than 0.1% for it. First Energy is going to pay the other 99.9%. And so AMP-T is getting some revenue. But remember, by AMP-T being a membership, you guys get access to AMP-T's personnel to ask questions. So a lot of things about engineering in the future, if you guys need simple things done on this system, those are things that you don't pay for because they have personnel that's all paid for by them doing this for you. I guess you guys own it. You're getting the return. So hopefully that answers that.
Councilwoman Spletzer, would you unmute yourself? You are next.
You didn't answer my question, sir. How are they getting the revenue?
Councilwoman Spletzer, would you unmute yourself, please?
How are they getting the revenue back?
Tim, Tim, listen. You have to wait until you're called on for the next round, Tim.
He didn't answer my question.
All right, Councilwoman Spletzer, you're next.
We can play this all day long. I have a mute button. Answer the question. Be transparent, please.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Lynch, I'll do it for you. I'm just trying to make sure. So I'm without a visualization, it gets a little bit harder for you guys. So you guys have transmission today. That transmission has a cost. First Energy has transmission today. That transmission has a cost. The way this will work is they're going to add your two costs together, and then they multiply that cost by your load, which is less than 0.1%. So First Energy gets attached 99.9% of the cost. You guys get 0.1% of the cost. And so the revenue comes from all of First Energy's customers. I guess I'm directly saying it. First Energy will pay, or other members of First Energy are going to pay over 99.9% of this cost. You guys pay less than 0.1, but I want to reemphasize, you're paying 100% today. So you're going to reduce your cost of these assets by over 99.9%. I hope that makes that very clear for you.
Aaron, would you take a shot at that?
Tim, I think your question was, what is AMP-T getting out of this? Why are they doing this? AMP-T is, in my understanding, got into this to help its members control its transmission costs. What do they get out of this? Helping the members, but also they get a return on what their annual debt service is each year. So the village has costs that'll go into AMPT's revenue requirement. AMPT has a revenue requirement of their own that goes into it, and it's a rate. And my understanding is AMPT receives a rate of return based on its annual debt service cost. That's why AMPT is doing this.
All right, Joe Gregor, you had another question. You're going to have to unmute yourself, though, Joe. I'm sorry.
No problem. My question is, with OEM, we have, don't our rates already have the new 69 switches in place to be replaced? And if we already have that into our, in our rates, there shouldn't be any new cost to the customers if we ever had to replace anything, because that's just basic maintenance that we do on our line, and that's already covered in our rates. So, yeah, with them coming in and paying us to do maintenance and give us the money to do that, I'm not really understanding why we would sell this transmission line.
Sure. Matt, you want to take a stab at that first?
Yeah, great question. And remember, if you guys went and put those switches in, and those switches are in your rates, that means you're already paying for them. That means your cost of service includes all the costs that you guys have spent over all these years in these assets. And one of the things that AMPT will do is they will recompensate you for whatever value's left of those assets. That's why there's a purchase price. So you're going to still have the same switch. You're going to go maintain it, but you're getting paid not only to maintain it now from somebody else. So it's no longer, you know, the salary, the administration costs, everything associated with that switch is now paid for by somebody else. It's no longer your community. The other thing, you're getting compensated for all the value you guys paid through all your rates through the years. Any value left on the system, you're getting compensated for all that. So you get two things. One is you get fair market value, which is what we keep saying. You also then get paid to maintain it. So is that number, the maintenance cost, very high? No, but that's more cost you guys don't pay for as a community. So you get two good things.
All right, Matt, I think the other implication of Joe's question, though, is that if our current rate structure is going to pay for these things, but now somebody else is going to pay for it, then we don't have to use our current rate structure to do so, which gives us an opportunity to take the stress off the increasing of the rates to our citizens. Okay, the next hand that is up is Mayor Klein. Mayor, go ahead.
All right, I'm addressing or just making a statement to yourself as well as council, sure. and that is that I'm not here and I'm not saying that it's a good deal or a bad deal, but the fact of the matter is I don't believe that we are informed enough to be making the decision in 1 week from today. My own thought on this, and it's very jump all over the place, but if you own your own equipment, you're making money. You sell it off, you're not making money anymore. I believe that we need to know a lot of things, such as where is the money going to once we get it, how much, what's the length of time, these monies coming back to us, how much they're going to be, a lot of things, so you can have an idea of how you're going to budget for not only us but our kids and our grandkids and stuff. Is this money we're getting back going to be gone in a year? Is it going to be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 100 years? Because I'm going to tell you an illustration of what I get if we turn around and make this deal in 1 week. It's like a crack addict. You know, you run off and you start pawning things. You pawn your John Deere mower that's $7,000 and you get $100 for it, and you buy a couple rocks, and at some point in time, the mower is gone, the money's gone, but the grass is still growing.
Sure.
You know, and that's why I would suggest that next week, you know, we slow down a little bit, like Mr. George said, and we take in some of this stuff and we get some of these answers. Where is the money going to go? How long is it going to be? And a lot of things like that. And just so that we can have a little bit better plan than we have right now.
All right.
And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt, excuse me, Aaron, I'm going to come to you first on the question of the selling of the assets and his analogy towards pawning your lawnmower. Aaron, let's start with you.
What's the question?
Well, he made an analogy that you don't want to be like a crack addict that's just selling off your assets. You can get the next hit, because once that asset's gone, you're not going to have anything for your next hit.
So we were talking about capital improvements and the 69 kV breakers and senior rates. It is true, it was part of the projected capital expenditures, but the part of that that's missing is the entire cost of those breakers are not in your rates. There's a certain portion of your projected capital improvements that are in your rates. The other portion was using funds on hand to pay for those capital improvements. So your rates weren't set to recover the entire amount of capital improvements that were projected. So
Sure.
the idea here is if you receive funds, fair market value for these assets, those funds could be used to either offset future capital improvement expenses, possibly decrease rates. A lot goes into that, and I don't disagree with what the mayor's saying. I think there's a lot of things that need to be projected out and talked about and explained.
Sure. The next person that had their hand up is Councilman Zimmerman, and Adam, you're going to have to hit the unmute button to be able to say something.
Okay. We've been talking here that regulations could be possibly coming down the road. If we do not sell these transmission lines right now, I mean, if we do sell them, we're talking about a great decrease to the town for a time. Is it fair to say that if we do not sell this equipment and we're responsible for these regulations as they come along, that we're going to need to prepare for the future? And the only way to really prepare for the future would be along the lines of a rate increase and not a decrease, in order to be prepared to meet these regulations when they come further down the road. Is that a fair question?
Sure. I'm going to go to you, Matt Goss, for a response on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And remember, your neighboring communities that currently own 138, they were put in a very bad spot by these regulations coming quick and coming swift. What you don't want to have happen is them say, we're including 69 kV in this conversation, because then you'll be in the same hurricane that they were in to solve that problem fast. So I'm not saying they're going to do it to 69 kV. I can't tell you, government's government on that. At the same time, you have a position here to get value for your assets and completely offload that risk anyways. Maybe there's a win-win for all parties. So yes, if it ever came to 69 kV, you would be in a situation you wouldn't want to own it. It's the same reason why all the communities that currently are served at 138 are all trying to sell their 138 assets right now. That's a very big commitment and a very big push. So I'd like to see you guys personally not be in that situation, so we can take the time to talk through a lot of things.
And Matt, NERC could do that to Newton Falls next year, couldn't they?
They could set a regulation. Usually it's about a year and a half out where they can say that we're starting it.
Yeah. Next person had their hand up is someone we haven't heard from before, and that is Laura. You have to unmute yourself. Please identify yourself. You have 30 seconds to ask a question, and we will come back to you, Laura, if you have more than one question. But please give us one question.
Sure. So I've been listening and kind of trying to follow along, and I guess being somebody who's not familiar with these terms and what exactly you guys are referring to when you use certain terminology, I still don't understand how they make that money back. I mean, and it might just be me, I still just don't understand how they put the $4 million or whatever it is going to buy it for, how they make that money back. And to add on, this isn't part of the question. This is more like a statement.
Well, hold on a second.
My
one
suggestion.
question at a time.
Okay.
Laura, we're going to come back to you. Matt, her question is how, and Laura actually asked the form of this question at the last council meeting, which is, she kind of asked the question, well, what's in it for the people at AMP-T? And now she's asking, well, how do they make their money back? And I think it's maybe probably the same question, if you could respond to that.
Yeah, and every time this is asked, I'll try to come up with a different way to explain it, because I know, so to make this clear, there's very few people in the country that understand how transmissions build and recover. Even people that work in utilities, this is very complex. So I'm trying to make sure that, you know, I can reach whoever's trying to figure this out. People that do this every day don't even know how they recover costs. So another example, you know, you can give is the communities, the village has a transmission bill that they have to pay. That bill is set based on everybody's usage in a few hours of the year. Well, that bill is all coming from one entity. The way they're going to recover their costs, they're going to take this cost and they're going to include it in that formula. So whatever the cost was before did not include this $4 million. They would take your guys' what we call a pro rata share. So whatever you're using as a community compared to all other customers, and they would just divide it out, and that's your bill. What they're going to do now is they're going to add this $4 million into that equation. So that's why you're going to pay your pro rata share, which is less than 0.1%, because you guys are less than 0.1% of the electric load within that footprint. So whatever the formula was before, and remember, when we're talking numbers, $4 million to you guys, at least in my opinion, is probably very large for a community. But to First Energy, they're spending over $1 billion a year, $1 billion in transmission. So that number that you're adding is extremely small to First Energy, but it's extremely big to you. So these conversations really start to look like they could be an astronomical thing to climb. They're not. And it's because the magnitude's so small. So hopefully that's another way to try to visualize this cost and where it's coming from.
Sure. There was another question that Matt Evans had. Matt, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself again, please.
Hi. So I remember years ago, there was talk of Aqua Ohio coming in, and we all know what they were infamous for. They'd come in and they'd buy you, and they'd run you into the ground, and then they would leave you with the cost. Sure. Is there any chance that if AMT purchases us in the next 25 years I have left here, if they're done with it, if they don't want it anymore, they want to sell it off, if we buy it back, are we going to have to pay to restructure all the transmission? Will they have to, is there a contract saying they have to keep it up to date? What's included with that for the future of our transmission?
Good question. By the way, I'm going to go to you on that, Matt, but the distribution network, which is 95% of our system, we don't want to sell, we're not going to sell, Matt, but you heard the question that the other Matt Evans had. So if you could respond to that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, great question. And again, this comes back down to, as an owner of transmission, you have an obligation that you have to meet based on all these regulatory authorities out there. So for them to be able to take that $4 million charge and add it into this pot of money, they have to meet all of these regulations by FERC and by PJM. That means these assets have to be operational. They have to be maintained. There's a whole bunch of regulations that have to be met. That's also why you guys as a community get paid to do all that work. So to answer your question, in 25 years, let's just say no more money was added on these assets. And these assets are now depreciated down to $0 and AMT wants out. They have to find a buyer. Now, in this space of transmission, it is a very lucrative business out there. That's why First Energy invests $1 billion a year. AEP invests $3 billion a year. This is a very lucrative business. Anybody would snatch those up from them at $0, because if they're depreciated, they're not worth anything. And now you have a new provider providing the same service. So to me, I don't see the risk, and they also can't just not do it. So I hope that answers your question. They're contractually obligated to do it.
Matt Koss, on that subject, Matt Evans' question begs that next step, though, and that is, we can't generate the money ourselves because we're not licensed to be in the transmission business. So we can't recover that ourselves. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement. And so my first comment would be, if you guys were capable and it was easy, my first advice before partnering with anyone is you might be able to do this yourself. However, it is very hard and difficult to get that approval through all the government agencies. And they don't want to approve every single community to have their own formula rate to maintain and go through all these procedures. So AMP-T was able to do it and let you guys be members of it and put these assets in there. It's just simpler. And if you were to see the control difference, to me, you guys, it's almost like you own them anyway still, in my professional opinion. So the headache you would get to do this yourself isn't worth the 3% adder you might get on these assets. You'd have a lot more pain associated with it.
But the next person has
Hey,
a label
Dave,
Tigers.
To add to that,
I'm sorry, Aaron, go ahead.
The village will have an O&M agreement with AMP-T, and the village will be responsible for planning the maintenance activities and budgeting for those. So with that O&M agreement, it's not AMP-T right or ability to run it into the ground. The village will still be required to maintain those facilities and be paid to do that.
All right, I'm going to use our name Tigers, but you got to give your name and tell us who you are. Go ahead.
First of all, I don't appreciate you kicking me, sir. I have questions, and
Tim, you were removed because
so
you kept on talking without being recognized, and that's what happens. Everybody has to wait till you get recognized. The next hand up is, looks like Joe Gregor was next. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, the other thing I was wondering, since, of course, I work in the electric department, but with us maintaining these facilities, there's certain specific equipment and tools that you're going to need to do this job. And we don't have those tools or that equipment. And this equipment is nowhere near cheap. And it's not something the city can really afford to buy at this given point in time. So if we're going to be paid to maintain this, how are we going to obtain this equipment to be able to do this job?
Okay. Well, I'll make an initial response to it since I've been working with these two fine engineers in negotiating or moving forward in the discussion. And the answer is that AMP-T will have to provide the cost of that. I'll go to you first, Matt, and see if you can elaborate to Joe's question.
Yeah, I guess I have two comments for that. One comment would be if you don't have the equipment today, then that means you're outsourcing to do all this work today, which makes this very expensive for you guys to do. But if you had the equipment to do this yourself today, then you can continue to do it in the future. However, the one of the comments here is AMP-T potentially buying equipment that they can let communities that they've partnered with use that equipment, like a larger bucket truck. So that conversation's ongoing that eventually AMP-T or somebody else you'll have access. And if you need to rent a truck, you guys are able to rent a truck and then take that cost and bill it to AMP-T to use it. So, you know, to me, whatever cost you had today to go rent that truck that you had to pay for, you don't pay for that in the future. So you're getting access to better equipment, safer equipment. You know, I mean, it should help you, right? A safer bucket truck that you guys can easily, so you don't have to climb poles, paid for by somebody else. It's a great win-win.
All right, Councilman Bariak, would you hit your unmute button, please? You have to hit your unmute button, Councilman. There you go. Go ahead, John.
Look, we're making a profit with our electric company. I wanted Mrs. Munson here tonight to so I could ask her some specific questions. I haven't seen anything yet on paper to vote for. I don't know what's coming, what's not coming, what we're getting, what we're not getting. That's what I want to ask you, Mr. Lynch. You won't even guarantee where the money's going. Now,
John, you're almost at 30 seconds. Do you have a question?
Look, sir, I'm a councilman. You want to run this? Let me talk.
We'll come back to you.
No, we don't come back because you've been talking all night. You've been talking all night.
John, what's your question?
Let me ask you the question. I'm trying to get.
Go ahead.
November 16th, they pushed through, I wasn't allowed into the council, to the chambers, to go to the meeting. They gave you sole discretion to go with this Scott Street School sewer project to obtain the money any way you could get it to get into that project. Now, you won't guarantee that all this money is going to go for a discount. I want to see something on paper.
Okay.
Well, then why don't we put this tableless motion?
Okay. The response to your question, John, is that the budgetary determinations as to where money goes lies with the city council. Next person is Councilman Alberini. You have to unmute yourself, Terry.
Thank you. Just a couple quick points. I've got 30 seconds. I don't recall us having to make a decision immediately on this. I think this is why we're having these town hall meetings for everybody's input, to review this and to digest it and see exactly which way we want to go. As far as Matt and Aaron, is there any negative downside to not doing this besides facing the possibility in the future, let's say 10 years from now, that maybe something happens to those transmission lines and the city of Newton Falls and its citizens are stuck with a bill?
Matt, you go first.
Yeah, my first downside is, doesn't matter the number. Let's just say it's $4 million. There's $4 million that you guys as a community are currently paying for in your rates. You might not have debt anymore associated with them. And I heard a comment that you guys are making a profit in electric. I guess, from my perspective, I'm less concerned if you're making a profit in electric. I'm more concerned about, can I lower your cost and still make a profit in electric? And you do that by making these types of decisions, or at least exploring these types of decisions. Here's a chance to have the exact same service, more reliability, and get more revenue into the town, and get a $4 million check. I guess you don't see a situation like this, and I understand the concern with any community associated with this. It sounds too good to be true. In electric, the answer is it's not, and it's because of the regulations have changed. They literally have changed in the last 15 years. Many communities have done what you guys are talking about right now. This is not new. So it's just let's just call it a windfall. And to me, you're missing out on the windfall the longer you wait.
All right, Councilwoman Splitzer had her hand up next. Tessa, would you hit the unmute button, please?
Yes, I've been waiting for quite some time. And what I don't think the consultants know, or what they don't know, is that we've never seen anything that looks remotely close to something called a contract. What we have been given is a piece of legislation called Ordinance Number 2021-02. And there's no way that anybody with enough brains in their head would pass this the way it is written. For one thing, it gives the city manager the authorization to set the residential and small business electric rates. That's in Section 1. In Section 2, it gives the city manager the authorization to take any action necessary to fulfill these agreements. And then in Section 3, we're giving up our rights in Chapter 721 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 4, my complaint with Section 4, I don't have anything written down. And well, Section 5 and 6 is saying that, if any part of this is found to be null and void, but, the rest of it still stays intact. There is no way any of my colleagues could possibly say that they would vote for a piece of legislation that looks like this.
Okay.
Now, if you...
Oops, I'm sorry. You have to unmute yourself again, Tessa. I'm sorry. Tessa, you're at a minute already. Could you give us a question, please?
When are you going to bring us a contract? I want to see a real contract.
Okay. All right. Next is Joe B. Joe B, you have to identify yourself because we don't know who Joe B is, and you have to hit the unmute button. Joe B, you have to say who you are. Joe B has left us. So we're going, oh, there he is. Okay, great. Thanks, Joe. Go ahead. Oh, it's Tim Stinson again. Tim, as you know, that you were removed by virtue of your coming in without being recognized. And next is on the lineup is Matt Evans again. I'm sorry, Matt, you hit the unmute button, please.
Yeah, hi. So just a quick question. I'm just kind of curious. So if we're selling because of the value of our transmission line, why are we selling it if it's all about value today versus years down the road?
That's a very good question. Matt Goss, that is,
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Yep. So, I mean, that's a great question. And it's one that, you know, we alluded to early is there's value today. There's also regulation today that lets you do this. In 3 years from now, the value, if you don't invest in this system, it's worth less. So an easy number is 2%. Let's just say it's worth $4 million. You're going to lose $80,000 every year you don't make a decision. 2% of $4 million, $80,000. Not the biggest thing in the world, but it's $80,000. That's, you know, 2 people's salaries in some department. That starts to add up. The other thing is, if regulations changed in 4 years and they made it more difficult to do this, you might miss the window to do this at all. So there is no guarantee in the future this stays. I hope it does, but it's there today. So again, you know, AMT is not going to push you guys into a deal. That is not what they're trying to do. I wouldn't push you into a deal. You know, I'm just here to give you guys the information you need to make an informed decision one way or another.
I'm going to go over to Aaron on that question, but Aaron, as you unmute yourself, one of the things that you and I have discussed before is that it's not necessarily the value that Evans is talking about, but it's also the value of cost avoidance. But I'll let you respond in your own way to Matt Evans.
Yeah, good question, Matt. The value that you're receiving for your assets, that is a short-term benefit. I think we're losing focus here on the long-term gains, which happens to be a greater reliability for your electric system. But over the long period, you guys are going to avoid transmission-related costs such as O&M and capital improvements. And over the long haul, that's going to be worth much more than any short-term gain on the value of your system. So long-term, it's more about avoiding transmission-related improvement costs and increasing reliability.
Laura, we rotated back to you again. You're going to have to unmute yourself.
I don't know. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can. We're not getting video from you, Laura, but we can hear you.
Okay, that's okay. So another question I have for the people that have done this. Has anybody come to you trying to get like the evacuation, try to pull out of this deal? Like after they signed up, they did this for a few years. Did anybody have a change of mind? That like any town come to you and say, how can I get out of this?
All right, let's go to that. That's a good question. Aaron, we're going to start with you this time, then we'll go to Matt. But you have to unmute yourself.
I'm not aware of any.
Okay. Matt?
In the multiple ones that I've worked on both sides of the equation, I have not had any one of them unhappy afterwards that asked to get out.
Sure.
But there are clauses in there potentially that can be negotiated that if you guys want out, you can get out.
Sure.
I mean, that's an option to Mr. Lynch.
All right, going to Julie Stimpert again. Ms. Stimpert, you're going to have to click the unmute button on your video.
I'm curious, the $4 million that we keep talking about, is that a one-time thing? What happens in year 2, year 3, year 4?
Yeah, I can answer that. The initial cash payment is going to be close to $4.2 million, and it is a single payment, but the payment for the maintenance costs and the administration costs associated with that, they continue, and any of the improvement costs they're paid from AMP-T ad infinitum. So in terms of just one-time cash in the door, that's 4.2, but the cash that's got to go for all the maintenance and improvements, that continues on into the future. Now, Matt, do you want to elaborate on that a little bit? Matt?
I'm just going to echo what you said. It's a $4.2 million payment to you guys in day one. Then it's going to be all ongoing costs will be paid for by AMP-T is kind of what we're alluding to. So any risk associated with these, you'll be compensated every time for it.
All right. Going to this one says the person's name is Question. They have their hand up, and so please identify yourself and unmute yourself, then ask the question.
So, Mr. Lynch, I have legitimate questions. Are you going to let me speak now or no?
I am not. You were removed for violating the protocol of being recognized first. And we are over to Joe Gregor again. Joe? Joe, we're not getting any audio from you. You've got to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Joe. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, okay, no problem. My concern is right now, I know we got 3 switches we're going to replace within our 69 system.
Yep.
Okay, and that would be basically like an upgrade to our system. Why couldn't we wait till we get those 3 switches in it, and our system will be worth more money than it is right now? And
Joe, that's a good question. My initial reaction to that is, why do you want to shove that cash out the door? That's our cash that belongs to our citizens to pay for that, when you can get AMP-T to put that cash out the door. Matt Goss, do you want to take that?
Yeah, great question. And one that is ironically can be answered exactly. It's whose cash do you want to use? You can pay for those switches today. So let's just say those switches cost you guys $200,000 to replace all switches with construction costs. You can pay $200,000 today. AMP-T will pay you back that $200,000 when you go with them. Or you can wait till AMP-T does this deal and they'll pay the $200,000. You guys never have to see that cash flow change. So that's kind of the benefit.
All right, Nacy, we're going to you. You have your hand up, but you have to identify yourself and unmute yourself. N-A-C-Y. All right, you want to identify yourself, please?
Why won't you? I have a legitimate question.
Nacy. That's Tim Stinson again. All right, we are going to, excuse me, Councilwoman Spletzer, you had your hand up. Would you hit your unmute button, please? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. This is a lot of information to take in. One thing that I have been able to clarify, that there is a difference between AMP and AMP-T, although I know that they're related. Now, what is the decision to go with AMP-T going to do as far as getting us out of these 9 contracts that you said 2 years ago, well, less than 2 years ago, was really no good for us?
Sure, I can answer that question. We have these various contracts with AMP. AMP-T is a subset of AMP, but is not the same as AMP. So it doesn't affect those contracts. What it does is it gives us an opportunity to foist some of the costs that we have going forward in the future onto a separate entity so that we don't have to charge our own ratepayers. And the reason I like that is the fact that we're paying those contracts that you're referring to, Tessa, makes our electricity more expensive to our consumers. And I would like to make our consumer costs go down. And we are going back to Councilman Bariak. And you have to unmute yourself, John. You have 30 seconds, John. Please ask a question.
What I haven't been told yet is how much is the discount? Is it going to be a permanent discount? How far is $4 million going to go, sir?
Sure. I'll be happy to respond to that. The discount itself, as Bill indicated, may not be as high as 20%. I'm hoping that it would be. But again, it's going to depend on how long we can make that last. We don't know into the future how long everything else is going to take. And the next person with a question was Councilman Alberini.
Thank you. So to Mr. Baryak's point about a reduction in savings for the consumer, isn't that somewhat based on the wholesale distribution costs we pay when we buy electricity too as well, in the fluctuation in the marketplace?
Yes, yes, it is. And that's why it's impossible to make a concrete determination. We're back again to Matt Evans. Matt, you need to unmute yourself, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, question for you. How many municipalities that are 69 kV versus 138 kV are selling?
Sure. We're going to go to both. Matt Evans, we're going to go both Matt Goss and Aaron, because they'll be able to talk to us about what those potentialities are. Matt Goss, you want to start?
I'm not able to tell you AMP-T's current clientele off of non-disclosures. There are 69 KVs looking. I will tell you that. Obviously, 138 all came together, which kind of caused this all to start. Now that conversation's hit all the 69 kV. So you're going to see a lot more, and they're active, but they are not out publicly yet from AMP. So I just can't tell you which ones I'm working with.
Okay, we're going over to Aaron to participate in a response to that question.
I don't know an exact answer to that. I can tell you that I know 3 other members that are looking into it.
Okay, next in line was Laura. Is it Nyheisel, Laura? Am I saying that right?
You are, yes.
Okay.
I pronounce it.
Sure, go ahead.
I don't know if it's possible, but do you think that maybe you or somebody, and I think this might be beneficial for the community, to put together tonight like a Q&A pamphlet to send out to the residents? I think if you did such, that you might get more people to understand. Sure. The way it was explained to me, I understand what you're saying about the division of costs. I missed that part earlier. That's why I didn't ask the question again.
Yeah, no, Laura, I think that's a great question, and I'll respond. I think I will organize that at the conclusion of this, because I think that's a terrific, really a terrific idea. This person is called Newton Falls, which is a great name, obviously. Please unmute yourself and say who you are.
Where's the sound?
Okay. All right. We are now dealing with NF. Where are you, NF? NF, you have to unmute yourself.
So, Mr. Lynch, I can do this all day long. Please allow me to speak at this meeting.
You lost that opportunity, sir, when you continued to speak without being recognized. And we are back to Matt Evans.
I feel like a Lone Ranger here.
Yeah.
Just
not by yourself.
Right? Just one very short, easy question.
Sure.
So the contract, or well, the beginning of the contract states 4.2 million. Will the 4.2 million all stay in the electric department and be used for the electric department only?
Great question. Again, that's a budgetary decision of the city council. Over to Councilman Bariak. You have to unmute yourself, John.
Are we going to be paid any money for them leasing our land? Do we get any money out of that?
I'm sorry, John, unmute yourself again. All right, the question was, are we getting paid for the leasing of the land? Matt or Aaron, can you tell me, is that rolled into the financials? And let's start with you, Aaron.
I believe there's a right-of-way valuation included in that 4.2 million.
Okay. Matt, can you shed any more light on that?
Yes, you are going to get paid at least for that, and also for the substation equipment. That's clearly on your land. That there's a value that they're going to pay you that you don't get today. So
all right,
you're going to get lines in that.
All right. I thought Councilman Zimmerman had a question. And so, Adam, if you could unmute yourself, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, well, basically, we've been hearing tonight that the $4.2 million is just a one-time upfront payment, and that is basically just what we're hearing is almost like not the real true value of this project. The true value is in the being paid in order to service the lines, the upgrades being provided by AMP and everything. And one of the things I heard is that we may be making enough on this to pay one person's salary. Have I been hearing that correctly?
Yeah, Adam, I'm going to flip over to Matt Goss on that because he mentioned something sort of like that. Matt, could you elaborate on Councilman Zimmerman's question?
Absolutely. Just to clarify, the question that was asked earlier is what's the risk of not doing this? And the comment is you lose 2% of the value of this system every year. So on $4 million times 2% is $80,000. I'm equating that to 2 jobs. That you could pay for 2 jobs by executing this of money you're just going to lose by doing that. 3 jobs. Thank you. So that right there tells you that's 3 employees that you could have paid for that you're just flat out losing by doing nothing. So does that make sense that you are getting paid that money or it's going to depreciate in your hands that you're not paying for?
All right,
not getting paid for.
Folks, please put your things in the form of a question. Mayor, you are unmuted, so we're going to Mayor Klein for the next question.
I don't have a question. Just I wanted to say, as the mayor and answering to people here, I'd like to see Tim Stinson be able to come in under his own name, not a fake name, and start off from square one with a clean slate. He didn't interrupt anybody, wasn't rude. I'd just like to see him man up and come under Tim Stinson and be recognized to ask his question.
All right. The next person is Laura Nyheisel. Laura, I don't know what it is about your name. There's an avoidance that happens in my brain with it, but your question is next.
You're not the only one. It's okay.
Okay.
Can you explain again, and I kind of came in late. I thought I heard like a percentage discount for the residents or businesses for X amount of years. Can you explain that again? Or I may have misheard it. I'm not sure.
Sure, that's okay. Your question is similar to what Councilman Bariak made, but Councilman Alberini kind of clarified, because we can make an estimate, but the market is going to be determining the cost of the electricity that we're purchasing. So we can't say for sure. My estimate, after looking through the financials, is that it'd be around 20%. Bill just commented a little bit ago that he doesn't think it would be quite 20%, but my estimate is somewhere around 20% for a minimum of 5 years, maybe 10 to 20 years by virtue of the fact that we are in a position where we can foist all those extra costs onto AMT. And I like the idea of having an electric department where a portion of our costs are paid by somebody else that are currently being paid by our current residents. And next is Joe Gregoire again. Joe?
Yeah, you say this cost that we're going to incur here is only going to last for 5 years. So at the end of that 5 years, so do the rates go back to where they were, or what happens at that given point in time? Because that money only lasts for so long, and when it runs out, what do we do?
Yeah, good question, Joe. What I was really saying was that I think it'll last a minimum of 5 years, could be 10 to 15 years. But one of the reasons I have so much confidence in its extended length is that the costs that we have that we can continue to foist upon AMT are significant, and we're absorbing those costs right now. So again, we don't know where the market's going to go, Joe, but all I know is that if I'm paying for something now and then in the future I don't have to pay for it anymore, that's a good thing. Next hand up is Councilman Beriak. You have to unmute yourself, John. I'm sorry.
Mr. Lynch, it's a two-part, but it's one question.
All right.
Number one, did you not say that we have no debt now?
You want to give me both parts at once, okay?
All right, and the other one that goes to that, don't we have a bond coming up for $925,000 in June?
Okay, I can answer both those questions. I did not say we don't have debt. We've been carrying debt for a long time. The total debt is around $900,000. The payment is about $300,000 a year. And I would guess that this council would use some of that money to eliminate that debt, which kind of goes back to Joe Gregor's question, because elimination of debt means reduction of cost. And Councilman Beriak, you still have your hand up, and you're the only one with a hand up right now, so I'm going to back to you, John. You have to unmute yourself again, John.
Are you going to let Mr. Simpson go on, sir? He has his hand up.
Well, I'll figure it out in just a minute. We've got some other people here.
Somebody
Councilman Alberini, you are next.
Alberini has his hand up.
Yes. Go ahead, Councilman
Yeah,
Alberini.
I stuck my hand up, Mr. Lynch. Wild Bill George here has had he's probably getting arm fatigue there. He's had his hand up. We were waiting for a while.
Okay. Bill, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, please.
I just wanted to help you a little bit here, I think. Everybody's asking about the rate reduction. I think that where some of this is coming from is if this would happen to go through and we sell it, I think you would take that money and pay off our debt to AMP. Of course, that's going to drop off that loan that we have to pay every year.
Is that the band, Bill?
Yeah, well, what's the band? The band is what insures that.
Right.
So you would lose both of them costs. So that's going to help our rates right there. So
sure.
I just want to bring that up to, that will help.
No, I appreciate it. Well, that was kind of the point I was trying to make, because getting a chance to control those rates is obviously a good thing. We're back to Councilman Beriak. You want to hit the unmute button, John? John, you're not unmuted.
I'll wait until I answer. I didn't hear the answer.
You mean Bill George's answer?
Your answer.
I did answer that question, Councilman. All right. Looking for other hands. Mr. Stinson is the last hand. And by the way, with great respect to the mayor, I do not want to reward people speaking out of turn. And the only way that we can make sure that's not rewarded is to make sure that they lose that opportunity. So, Mr. Stinson, if you want to call me tomorrow or send me an email, I will make sure that there is a response, and I'll be happy to make that public. And I'm looking for other hands. Seeing none others, I want to say thanks to everybody. Appreciate it very much. And thank you for participating to all of our guests. We're at the
If you would answer the question, I wouldn't have to interrupt, but I can't get an answer.
Okay.
And you have the ability to mute every.
Okay. All right. One more question from Councilman Beriak. Councilman Beriak, would you unmute yourself, please?
Yes. Mr. Lynch?
Yeah.
What I'm able to ascertain, won't we be getting a lot of coronavirus money for our utilities? It's in the $1.9 trillion bill that was just passed. I heard that there's going to be money there for our utilities. Is that, and other projects in town?
Yeah.
Is that true, sir?
That is not true. Okay. There's the answer to that question. Joe Gregor, you have the floor. You want to hit the unmute button?
Okay, I only have one more thing to say. I've been in this line of work. Coming April 4th will be 30 years I've been doing this, building and maintaining power lines. And I'm not totally sold on this selling of this transmission line at this given point in time, but I'm willing to look at the information with Bill George and have an optimistic look at it. But I'm sort of under the understanding that when you buy a restaurant, you don't sell the kitchen off.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
but
hear you, Joe.
there's so many things here that we don't know about, so many variables. And with my experience, the only thing I can recommend here is we table this till we can get all the information out there and everybody's on the same page. Sure. And we know, you know, there's no questionable doubt here, and we don't try to rush this thing through.
And
That's all I wanted to say.
All right, no problem.
Can I help with the analogy on that?
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
I just want to make sure that, you know, we're having a lot of analogies out here. And the idea that you have a house and a kitchen sink tells me that you have one entity that's combining this into one thing and you're trying to separate it. In AMP, all the communities, you guys are actually more on the unique side of it than you are on the normal side of it. Not every community actually owns the transmission lines coming into their facilities. They don't have to own them. Most of these other communities are not going to be in the same situation you're in. They never had to build a transmission line back in the day. So there is, you know, I'm trying to make sure if I were to give a different analogy, this is a question of, do you want to build a brand new highway, which could be paid for by the state or by your community to access your same village? It's nowhere related to a house and it's something inside the house. This is, you know, in interstate commerce, which people understand a little bit better, is you don't have to pay for that highway because that's coming from state funds. That's not coming from your own community funds. So this, to me, the analogy that you're looking for is, would you pay for the highway to come next to you? Or would you let the state pay for it is a much closer analogy. And then the next piece that I want to make sure everyone understands, you guys are on the unique side of AMP that you had to pay for these assets back in the day, both unfortunately and now fortunately, because you can get paid back for them. So this is, you know, when we say that there's so many active projects with AMP, they have 135 members, not 135 members own transmission. Very few of them do. And all of them are starting to have this conversation. So don't think this is a windfall to 135 members. This is, you know, this is unique to you guys.
Councilwoman Spletzer, you had your hand up. Could you hit the unmute, please, Tessa?
There it is.
There you go.
Usually it pops up in the middle of the screen.
That's okay.
I did not get an answer to my question. I asked you, when are we going to get a contract? Because this piece of legislation, I will not vote for this. No way will I ever vote for this piece of legislation. I want to see a contract.
Okay. Councilman Bariak.
I just wanted to ask these two fellas, they're from these companies. How long have you been doing consulting or work for Newton Falls?
All right, John, hold on a second. Aaron, question to ask of you is, how long have you been doing this kind of work for Newton Falls?
Oh, Newton Falls since 2017.
And generally speaking, Don, you want to answer that?
Well, I've been doing this work, not necessarily for the village, 42 years.
Okay. Next one is, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped Matt Goss for you to answer. How long have you been up to this, Matt?
I was just brought in with you guys just recently, and I've been doing this for over 11 years on both sides of the equation for utilities and on the outside of utilities.
All right. Julie Stimpert has a question. Ms. Stimpert, go ahead.
I would like to ask, moving forward, I hear council members saying they want time to see things. Bill George said the same thing. I was just curious, moving forward, the teams meeting together to get this information, if I need to my foot's bothering me, I go to the foot doctor. Is Bill George, Gregor, are those part of this team moving forward to educate and make the best decision for Newton Falls?
Sure. The answer to that is yes. All right, Councilman, no, I'm sorry, Laura Nyheisel was next.
Yeah, I like the highway analogy. I guess I'm going to use that one. I think right now we own the highway. We own the road. So it might not be the best road, but we own it and we pay for it when we keep it up to date. But we're going to be selling off to make it into a highway. I understand that, but I think that's what everybody doesn't understand is we own it right now. So again, I think doing some type of flyer, if you want people on your side, you're going to have to talk to them and explain it, because right now I think there's a lot of questions out there.
Yeah. By the way, I tend to agree. I thought that idea of the pamphlet was a good one. All right. I couldn't tell. Ms. Stimpert, did you have another question, or is your just flag was left? Okay, sorry. I saw your hand was still up. My apologies.
Mr. Lynch, I have about 15 more questions.
Mr. Stimpert, I can't tell, Stinson, where you...
I got about 15 more questions. Are you please going to allow me to speak or not?
No, I'm not.
Why not, sir?
If you forfeited that at the beginning of the meeting. Okay, and...
So if you would just answer questions transparently, we wouldn't have this kinds of issues instead of trying to kick the citizens of the public.
Hi, folks.
So why can't you just allow us to speak?
I've tried to have him removed. He had an opportunity to talk.
Mr. Lynch, just answer my questions and Ms. Spletcher's questions and Mr. Baryak's questions. I have about 15 more legitimate questions here that need to be answered.
Okay. All right. Next.
You're not going to answer me. So I'd like the news to just make sure this is Mr. Stinson, that our city manager in a town hall meeting will not allow the public to speak. I'd just like that to be shown, and the citizens of the...
Okay, Councilman Baryak.
I would hope, and I hope I got the right answer tonight, that we will have a contract in hand, Mr. Lynch, something on paper. At least with the smart meters, we had a contract in hand. We knew what we were voting on. AMI gave us all the specifics. Will you commit, sir, to giving us a contract and letting us know exactly where we're at so we can vote intelligently?
Yeah, thank you, Councilman. I have no problem going through these various terms, but as Mr. George indicated, there are some other elements that are going to have to be looked at in terms of the maintenance issues. And we're going to Councilman Alberini.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. I just wanted to say thank you to Aaron. I know you've been with the city for a while. Thank you to Matt for, I know MS Consultants is a great company. I appreciate your expertise and your guidance in these matters. There's always a question whether or not, the advice that we get is correct or not correct, but you guys are experts in the field. I'm satisfied with what I've heard so far. And I think probably, as Mrs. Stimpert said, that we'll get our team together and talk it over with Bill and Joe and those guys, and hopefully we come up with a good conclusion. I do like the idea of getting the 4.2 million in the city's coffers now. I'm sorry to ramble on, Mr. Lynch. One more final thought. What concerns me is that Mayor Klein talked about our children's children down the road. I don't want to see our children and their children's children be saddled with some debt to repair transmission lines that we could have sold now instead of waiting in the future to dump those assets. So thank you, Mr. Lynch. I'm good to go.
All right.
Everybody in the Zoom, I enjoyed all the comments. It was great. It was fruitful.
All right, thanks, everybody. We are past 2 hours and 10 minutes. I'm bringing this to a conclusion. Anybody has any further comments, my email address is known, and I will publish those results as I promised Mr. Gregor. Have a great night, everybody.